The supreme overlord of the insectoid Voth, Ector, prostrated himself before the human peacekeepers on his homeworld. He begged for help from the very species the Voth tried to enslave mere decades ago. Tensions had long simmered between the warlike Voth and the humans, tasked with enforcing an uneasy truce. But a greater threat now loomed over them all, the Nock, a ruthless machine intelligence hell-bent on eradicating all organic life. Space Marine. Jeremy Morales watched in disbelief as the towering bee-like alien groveled at his feet, antennae quivering with fear. Through a translation device, Ector detailed the Nock's unstoppable advance. Voth colonies had already fallen. Their homeworld would be next, then the neighboring Melis, and finally, humanity itself. Only the humans' superior weaponry offered any hope, but old wounds still festered. Many of Jeremy's comrades wanted to let the Voth reap what they had sown. The human leadership remained divided, even as annihilation crept closer by the day. Jeremy realized it fell to him to convince his skeptical commander to mount a defense, to forge an alliance from bitter enmity, and to gear up for total war against an enemy that had never known defeat. The survival of 3 races hung in the balance. The Voth's pleas for aid would test humanity's noblest ideals and decide the fate of the galaxy. Jeremy raced through the sterile corridors of the human command center, his heart pounding in his chest. He burst into the meeting room, interrupting Commander Zachary Hoffman and his top officers mid-discussion. "Sir, I have urgent news from the Voth," Jeremy said, struggling to catch his breath. "Supreme Overlord Ector is begging for our help against the Nock. They're on the verge of annihilation." Commander Hoffman leaned back in his chair, his brow furrowed. The other officers exchanged skeptical glances. "The Voth? The same ones who tried to enslave us not too long ago?" Hoffman asked, his tone icy. Jeremy stepped forward, his hands clenched at his sides. "I know our history with them is complicated, but we can't just let them be wiped out. The Nock won't stop with the Voth. They'll come for us next." A heated debate erupted in the room. Some officers argued that the Voth had brought this upon themselves, that humanity owed them nothing. Others pointed out the risk of casualties, the strain on their resources. But Jeremy refused to back down. "We have a moral obligation to help," he insisted, his voice rising above the clamor. "If we turn our backs on them now, we're no better than the Nock." Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the command center. Red lights flashed on the holographic displays. "Sir, long-range sensors have detected a massive Nock fleet entering the system," a young officer reported, her face pale. "They're heading straight for the Voth homeworld." The room fell silent as a visual of the Nock ships appeared on the main screen. They were unlike anything Jeremy had ever seen, asymmetrical crafts of black metal that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Commander Hoffman stared at the screen, his eyes hardened. He turned to his officers, his decision made. "We have no choice. The first human expeditionary force will mobilize immediately," he ordered, his voice ringing with authority. "We cannot let the Nock continue their rampage unchecked." Jeremy felt a surge of adrenaline as he rushed to the hangar bay with his fellow Marines. They boarded their ships, checking weapons and running system diagnostics. The air crackled with tension and anticipation. On the Voth homeworld, Ector received the news of the human reinforcements with a mix of relief and trepidation. Some of his warriors objected to fighting alongside their former enemies, but Ector silenced them with a stern click of his mandibles. "The humans are our only hope now," he said, his compound eyes reflecting the fires of burning cities. "We must put aside our differences and stand together against the Nock." As the Nock drones swarmed the skies like a plague of locusts, the stage was set for a battle that would determine the fate of 3 races. Jeremy stood on the bridge of the assault frigate Hornet, watching as the human fleet formed up with the remnants of the Voth armada in orbit. The odds were stacked against them. The Nock ships outnumbered the Allied force 3-1, and their weapons were terrifyingly advanced. But as the first volleys of fire were exchanged, Jeremy felt a stubborn persistence settle over him. This was the moment he had trained for, the ultimate test of his skills and courage. He knew that the survival of the Voth and perhaps the entire galaxy, hinged on the outcome of this battle. The humans and the Voth would have to fight harder than they ever had before, to forge bonds of brotherhood in the crucible of war. As the Hornet dove into the fray, its lasers blazing, Jeremy steeled himself for the fight of his life. The battle for the Voth homeworld had begun, and he would give everything he had to see it through to the end. The void of space erupted in chaos as the Nock fleet unleashed its assault. Black ships, their surfaces writhing with sinister energy, disgorged swarms of metal drones. The machines tore through the Voth defenders without effort, rending hulls and vaporizing crews in an instant. Jeremy gripped the command console of the Hornet as the ship shuddered under enemy fire. "All batteries, open fire!" he shouted. The frigate's plasma cannons roared to life, spitting superheated bolts at the incoming swarm. Missiles streaked from launch tubes, detonating in brilliant flashes that obliterated scores of drones. On the Voth flagship, Supreme Overlord Ector clicked his mandibles furiously, directing his fleet's counterattack. Insectoid warriors piloted their ships with savage intensity, energy beams lancing out at the Nock vessels, but their weapons splashed harmlessly against the enemy's shields. Jeremy watched in horror as metallic tendrils erupted from a Nock battleship, lashing out to ensnare a Voth cruiser. The tendrils constricted, crumpling the alien vessel like a tin can. The cruiser's death throes lit up the battlefield as it exploded in a silent fireball. "This isn't working," Jeremy muttered. He keyed the ship-wide comm. "Marines, prep for boarding action. We're going in." Moments later, Jeremy led a squadron of heavily armed humans towards the gaping maw of a Nock dreadnought. Their boarding pods screamed across the gulf of space, slamming into the vessel's hull with bone-jarring force. Cutting torches flared as the Marines carved their way inside. Jeremy's boots hit the deck of the alien ship with a clang. The interior was a maze of twisting corridors, bathed in sickly green light. His team moved forward cautiously, weapons at the ready. They didn't have to wait long for resistance. A horde of spindly robots rounded a corner, their limbs ending in wicked blades and energy weapons. The Marines opened fire, their guns thundering in the confined space. Nock machines fell in droves, but more kept coming. "Push through!" Jeremy roared, firing his rifle one-handed as he used the other to smash a robot's head. The close-quarters battle was brutal and chaotic. Human and machine bodies piled up as the Marines fought their way deeper into the ship. By the time they reached the central chamber, Jeremy's squad was down to a handful of battered survivors. Before them pulsed a massive sphere of crackling energy, the dreadnought's power core. "Concentrate fire," Jeremy ordered. The Marines poured everything they had into the glowing orb. Cracks spread across its surface as alarms blared throughout the ship. With a final thunderous blast, the core detonated. Jeremy and his team sprinted for their escape pods as the dreadnought tore itself apart around them. They launched just as the ship exploded in a spectacular eruption of light and debris. But their victory was short-lived. Even as the remains of the destroyed dreadnought tumbled away, more Nock vessels surged forward to take its place. Jeremy watched helplessly as enemy boarding craft breached the Allied defensive line. On the surface of the Voth homeworld, the situation was equally dire. Nock landing craft descended on the capital, their weapons reducing the hive cities to rubble. Frenzied Voth defenders were brushed aside like insects before a hurricane. In the shadow of his towering palace, Supreme Overlord Ector rallied his royal guard for one final stand. The Voth ruler's compound eyes reflected the fires consuming his world as he led the charge against the advancing Nock forces. The battle that followed was savage beyond description. Voth warriors fell by the hundreds, their chitinous bodies piling up alongside the corpses of human allies. But the Nock pressed on, their superior numbers and technology proving insurmountable. Ector fought with the desperation of one who knows all is lost. His energy staff crackled as he struck down foe after foe. But in the span of a heartbeat, searing beams of light reduced his guards to ash. The Voth overlord found himself alone, face to face with a towering figure of gleaming metal. Dark energy crackled around the Nock Supreme Archon as it loomed over the insectoid ruler. Ektor's antenna drooped in despair as the machine raised its weapon, preparing to end the Voth resistance once and for all. The Nock Supreme Archon loomed over Ektor, its metallic form pulsing with dark energy. Ektor's compound eyes reflected the glow of the machine's weapon as it prepared to strike. A thunderous explosion rocked the ground. Jeremy Morales and his squad of Marines burst through the smoke, weapons blazing. Explosive shells and plasma bursts tore into the Archon's chassis. "Light it up!" Jeremy bellowed. The air filled with the staccato of gunfire. Chunks of metal flew from the Archon as rounds found their mark. It staggered back, momentarily stunned. The respite was brief. The Archon's arms transformed into cannons, unleashing a barrage that sent the humans diving for cover. Energy beams scorched the earth, leaving glowing craters. "Flank it," Jeremy ordered. His troops fanned out, exploiting gaps in the Archon's defenses. Private Rodriguez sprinted forward, satchel charge in hand. "For Earth!" he cried, hurling himself at the Archon's force field. The explosion consumed him, but the shield flickered and died. Ektor rallied his Voth warriors. They swarmed the Archon, peppering it with bioammunition and energy stingers. The air filled with an acrid smell as caustic fluids ate into metal. Jeremy saw his chance. He pulled the pin on a fusion grenade and hurled it with all his might. "Fire in the hole!" The blast tore the Archon in two. Its upper half toppled, arms flailing. Sparks showered from severed cables as coolant fluid pooled on the ground. The light in its eyes flickered and died. For a moment, silence reigned. Then a cheer went up from the Allied forces. The Nock Armada hung motionless in the sky, their hive mind turning from the loss of their leader. Jeremy turned to Ektor. "Now's our chance. We need to press the attack." Ektor's mandibles clicked in agreement. "All warriors to arms. Drive the invaders from our world." Human gunships swooped low, unleashing salvos of Hellfire missiles. Explosions blossomed across Nock ship formations. Voth bombers dove into the fray, their pilots on one-way missions to cripple the largest enemy vessels. On the ground, Jeremy fought alongside Ektor's honor guard. They carved a path through waves of robotic horrors. Jeremy's rifle barked again and again, each shot finding its mark. Beside him, Voth warriors wielded energy blades with deadly precision. "Push forward!" Jeremy shouted, decapitating a Nock drone with his combat knife. "We've got them on the ropes!" Slowly but surely, they gained ground. The defensive ring around the Voth capital solidified as more allies joined the fight. Jeremy and Ektor coordinated their forces, plugging gaps and exploiting weaknesses. As the last Nock forces retreated, Jeremy allowed himself a moment of relief. But the respite was short-lived. A junior officer approached, his face grim. "Sir, long-range scans are picking up massive Nock reinforcements. They're gathering for another attack, and this time, they're bringing everything they've got." Jeremy exchanged a look with Ektor. The battle was far from finished. Humanity and its newfound allies faced their greatest test yet.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.